So, welcome to Chorlton Book Festival 2020. I'm here today with Okechukwu Nzuli, the author of The Private Joys of Nenna Maloney. My name's Aisha. I'm from a business called Maloney Wright, and we are a local indie bookseller in Manchester. And we came on board with the Chorlton Book Festival earlier on in this year. And we're just really excited to maybe bring a different angle to the festival and, encourage a bit more diversity on the panel. So this is how this conversation has come about with Oki. And before I start, I just want to say how Oki and I met. So, like I say, Maloney Wright established about 8 months ago. And I remember telling a member of my family that this is what I was going to do. And he turned around and said, "Oh, well, you do know your nephew's form teacher is an author." And I was like, "Get out of here. What do you mean his form teacher is an author?" So he told me about your book, Oki, and told me to get in touch. And I emailed you, and you were so kind, and you got a copy to me. And it transpired that we actually live 2 roads away from each other. And it was like meeting an old friend. We met. I can actually remember the day clearly. It was pouring down with rain, and this is the way in Manchester. So I'm so terrible. I'm a Londoner who's been in Manchester 13 years, and the weather still gets me.
I never quite get used to it. I'm not going to lie.
No, I've got better. So now I dress for the weather. I've got the wellies. I've got the umbrella. But that day caught us out, and we were stood under the rain on good old, Withington Road and round that way. And it was pouring, and you gave me a whole load of books, and it was my first introduction into YA diversity books, and it, blew me away. And I think I replied to you fairly quickly. I think I literally read it in like 2-3 days, and I was like, "Dude, we need to work together. We need to do something with this book." And slowly but surely, opportunities have arisen where we have been able to come together. And just excited to do this today and bring you on board. You are a local Manchester author, and I think it's really important for people to know this, people to know that there is talent in Manchester, and these voices need to be heard. So I guess before we carry on with our conversation, it would be lovely if you would maybe read a little bit from The Private Joys of Nenna Maloney in case people haven't read it.
Yeah.
And also, guys, if I'm talking too fast, which I often do when I'm nervous, message me and say, "I should slow down."
Lovely. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here at Chorlton Book Festival. This is such a lovely event to be doing, and with Aisha of all people, it's fantastic. I'd like to read to you a little bit from The Private Joys of Nenna Maloney. I'm going to read a section which sort of illustrates a little bit about the relationship between Nenna, who is the protagonist, and her mother. In this section, Nenna's mother, Joni, is picking her up from a sort of a summer job that she's been doing at a fast food shop. Joni quickly wound up the window and commanded her face to betray no reaction to the smell. Nenna had worked at the takeaway part-time for most of the summer, and Joni was starting to get good at pretending. She held her facial expression fast and tried to busy herself with minutiae about the car to give the impression that she had other things on her mind. Before, air fresheners used to hang in thick, accusatory bunches on the rear-view mirror, while Joni made tiny, explosive comments about the smell and suggested that Nenna's personal hygiene might be partly to blame. Joni tried to ignore it now. Even as autumn was rolling in, even when, as now, it was very cold, she wound down her windows as far as they would go, which varied according to the car's mood, until she saw Nenna coming out of the building. She wound up the windows when Nenna arrived because not to do so would hurt Nenna's feelings, but she convinced herself that the smell wasn't as bad if she'd given the car a good airing first. For her part, Nenna only plonked herself down on the back seat of the car and said thanks, with her earphones still in. For picking her up, Joni was never, ever late, and for not wanting to hurt her feelings, which were always out in the open. Nenna knew why the car was cold. Love can be such a tiny thing. Neither of them even noticed it as they sat silently in the car, smelling of unholy meats and vowing to have a wash, a really good scrub, at home.
Oh, that, there's so much in just that short paragraph. And I think what really struck me is your way with words and your descriptions, and how you find such a fine balance between Joni as a mother and her insight into life, and her experiences and the analogies she makes, and then Nenna as a teenager. But we will go on to that. I think there's so much to discuss. I've got a few questions I wanted to put to you, Oki, and if we kind of work through them, then the conversation may stray, it may go somewhere else, but I think this would just be a kind of good start to go on. So I don't know if a lot of you know, but both Oki and I are both educators in independent schools in Manchester. And I guess when I first came across, again, your book, I was really interested to know what your pupils or your colleagues have thought about you being a published author, and how they've responded to the books. Have any of them read it? And, just how have they found it, and how have you found working in a school and still maintaining your day job as a teacher, yet also being now this published author and being out there in the big wide literary world? So, yeah, any insight on that would be great.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful adventure so far. I mean, it's been incredible. And as you say, I'm a high school teacher, and the school that I teach in has been very supportive. I think, what English teacher doesn't dream of having a book published someday? And when it actually happened, it was this wonderful thing that I think they were all just really happy about. And one of my friends in our English department, we were on a school trip to the theatre. On the way back to the bus from the theatre, she actually ran away from the bus into the Waterstones, grabbed a copy and dashed back to the bus before it pulled out. And she read it, and she had reviewed it on Goodreads within 24 hours. And there was just a lot of really lovely excitement among the staff, especially for it. And I was surprised that some of my students actually have read it. I was amazed, because I always feel like they've got enough homework to do without another book to read. But yeah, I've had a lovely response from the students as well. One of my sixth formers, a few of my sixth formers actually read it. They've left now. They've gone on to sort of university now. But yeah, last year, a few of them read it and made really lovely comments about the content and the connection between one of the texts I was teaching them, actually, which is really insightful. It was really humbling, actually, to have that sort of attention paid to it by my students. It was lovely.
It's lovely, isn't it? And it's also lovely when they take an interest then in actually you as a person, and you others to your day job. So yeah, that's so lovely of them. And you obviously, you said you were an English teacher. So has wanting to be being a writer something you've always aspired to? Like, have you always known that, there's going to be a book out there by me, I'm going to do this? Or has it been a long journey of discovery?
It's been a bit of both, to be honest with you. I've always wanted to write, and I've always enjoyed writing. When I was really small, I remember learning how to write, physically how to write sentences and words, and then it just seemed like the logical thing to do after that, to write a story. I'm not going to claim that anything I wrote was very good at the age of 4, however old I was when I learned to write, but that would just seem like the natural thing to do. And then I went on a journey, I guess, of thinking about, as I got older, why I want to write. I think for most adult writers, it's not necessarily about writing just for fun. I think writing is a tremendously fun thing to do, even though it's difficult and challenging. But it is also, you get to, I guess, a certain age and you wonder, what am I doing this for, really? What is the bigger sort of purpose behind it? And I guess in the topics that we'll talk about later on in the interview that'll come out, but I've really learned to see writing in a much more profound way, I think, in terms of what it can do, and the what it can, how it can reach people and how it can move people. And hopefully this first novel is the first step on a further journey of learning how to write and learning how to connect with people in that way.
Yeah, I mean, the response has been amazing, and being a debut novel, and to obviously you won the Betty Trask Award this year, and you've been shortlisted for numerous awards. So I think if there's ever an accolade to say, like, kid, you need to be doing this, right? Do you think there was a pivotal moment in your life where you thought, this is the time now, this is the time I'm ready to write the story?
Yeah, I think I never quite felt ready, but I definitely felt it was now or never when I graduated from university. Even though it took me 8 years after that moment, to actually get to the point where I had a novel that I felt like an editor could really see, I felt okay. I spent 3 years just studying literature. I feel like now I have I feel like now I need to give it a go myself, and I know it's going to be difficult, and I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to redraft, and as I did several times. But at that point, I thought, if I don't make a go of it now, I'm not sure that I ever will. So I did.
So 8 years is a long time, like you say. I mean, I don't know if you're anything like me, but for me, my biggest downfall is fear. I can cripple myself. Did you ever experience that? Did you ever just get to a point where you were like, okay, look, like a year's gone by, 2 years gone by, like I just need to just stop this? Or did you always know that I've got this, I can do it?
I never really, there was a lot of uncertainty, I think, in writing. You can write as well as you can. You can write about what you're passionate about and you can believe in what you've written, but there's never a guarantee that anybody's going to publish it. That's just the way that publishing works, and it is a risk, and you risk that you're going to invest a lot of time and effort in something that maybe nobody will ever really see. So I never knew that it was going to be published, and there was always that awareness. But I tried really hard to sort of keep that to the back of my mind, because it is difficult to write if you are, afraid that if you let that sort of fear take over. I know exactly what you mean. You have to try and I guess it's a kind of discipline, which is really hard. You have to be able to try and focus on where you want to be, rather than where you necessarily are at that time, because there is a lot of rejection involved in writing. I didn't get a publishing contract straight away from the first person that I sent the novel to. There were people who said, "Oh, we like it, but it's not for us." Or, there were a lot of near misses with people who, just before I met my agent and publisher, there were a lot of 3 or 4 people who said, "I would love to take it on, but I'm actually leaving my job now, and I'm going to be an editor in a non-fiction department, or I'm leaving this agency and I won't be able." So there was a lot of rejection and sort of near misses, and I just had to keep going. And the best way to put it is that I really felt that I was on the other side of the publication of this book. I felt like I couldn't quite let it go until I'd done everything I possibly could.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I ended up with the publisher I love. I'm very lucky.
But you know what? I commend you for that, because knockbacks, like I say, can really throw people, and it's so easy to kind of just go, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I mean, I can't relate on the level that you have done it, but like even doing this today, I put a tweet out this morning going, like, this is about stepping into my power, and it's now on my slogan actually. So this year, and since Remember Me Right, I've had to face so many things that I've been so uncertain of, and yet, like, I feel with every day there's a new confidence. And I was like, excuse my language, people, but I was like, sod it, okay, I'm going to do a live. I've got no clue about how to host, but let's just do this. I mean, what am I going to lose, right? People are going to think I'm an idiot online, but hey ho, it's all good.
And we're doing
it. And I'm so glad it's with you, because I know you and it's lovely. So yeah, great. So moving on, I know in past conversations you and I have had, we've talked about the need for own voices, northern voices, but also the need for writers of colour. And what I wanted to gauge from you is why this representation matters. Also, we've talked a lot about the Poetry and Maloney being situated in Manchester, and you've grown up here. Why was it so important to set it here as opposed to other cities? I mean, like I say, London often comes up in most YA books, and I know as a reader why it really struck me when I was reading, like, it was set in Manchester. But why are all of these things important to you?
Yeah, I mean, those are really important questions, I think. I'm really lucky to be with a publisher, Dialogue Books, which is very passionate about diversity and inclusion and the representation of marginalized voices, like people of color, like the LGBT community, like disabled people, working class people. It's really important to them, and they really champion those voices in a way that no other imprint is doing at the moment. Yeah. So I'm really fortunate because it is important. I think it's very hard to be what you can't see. You know, in my 20s, I started reading writers who were much more diverse in terms of their ethnic origin and in terms of their sexual orientation and class background, but that wasn't something that was a part of my education at school that I grew up with, and that really affected my writing. And then suddenly, when I was 20, 21, 22, 23, I had these kind of, I was much more capable of clarifying how I saw the world and what I wanted to write about and how I would go about doing that, because I'd read these things. I remember reading Zadie Smith's White Teeth, which is set in London. Yeah. But you know the book. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fantastic, isn't it? And I remember reading that and thinking, even though this is set in London, this is a world that I recognise. This is a multicultural world. This is a world with people from very different backgrounds living next door to each other and being best friends. And it isn't always rainbows and butterflies, but it is a real, recognisable human world that I recognise. Yeah. That book, more than many others, really inspired me. And so with Nenna and writing it set in Manchester, I've read so many books set in London, and I've read books set in worlds that are made up. I've read books set in, Hogwarts and Earthsea and all sorts of things. It seems not too far a stretch to be able to set it in a real city or two real cities, Manchester and Cambridge, that I know. Partly because I do know those places. I feel like those are the places that I'm most able to make convincing and realistic.
Yeah, it gives it that real authenticity, doesn't it? And I guess it's so I love having this conversation with you, because everything you say is exactly why I started to rewrite. It's very much for those reasons that, also as somebody who's loved literature growing up and a woman of colour and a woman of faith, I read all the classics, and we grew up with Enid Blyton. But now as a mother, when my kid is still coming home from school with Enid Blyton now, I'm like, dude, we've moved on. So many good writers out there. And also for me, it was very much about, developing a conversation of representation in the world. We want children to grow up to be global citizens, and yet we limit what they identify with in stories. It just didn't connect for me. And I think, again, going back to us being educators also, I think it was for me about raising the profile of all of those from different backgrounds, because we all have stories to tell. And, I guess when I came across you too, it's very much that passion about authentic voices. Like, I don't need someone else to tell me about my cultural background when I can write my own story. And I guess that's what I saw in you. Yeah. And that comes across so much in The Private Joys of Nenna Maloney also. And in other great, writers of colour and writers who are rooted in the agenda, and, so many tales like that. So, yeah, I'm all up for that. And like I say, everything you've just said in your answer is spot on, dude. So, right. So moving on, can you tell us about The Private Joys of Nenna Maloney, how the story came about and the inspiration behind it?
Yeah. So for anybody who hasn't read it, it is a comedy about a teenage girl called Nenna, who is half Nigerian, and she lives in Manchester with her single mum, Joni, who is white. They have a really close and tender relationship with lots of warmth and humour. But when Nenna starts asking questions about her father, Morris, who she's never met, who is this Igbo-Nigerian man, the relationship becomes quite strained and difficult and distant in a way that it wasn't before. So it's the story of those two learning about one another and about themselves, and also about a cast of other characters in Manchester from a range of backgrounds and experiences, who experience their own sort of coming of age stories and growing up at all sorts of different times in life. And this was really very much inspired by things I had seen and experienced. None of the characters are based on anybody, but I think every character has a little bit of me in them in terms of how I see the world or how I would respond to certain things at certain times in life. And it was a really fun journey for me in terms of writing a cast of very different characters who are going through maybe the same thing in different ways.
Yeah. So interesting that you started that with saying that it's a comedy, because there is actually, I made a list of all the things you cover in this book, and it's actually quite remarkable how you managed to do this. But, for me, Private Joys of Nenna covers conversation around race, sexuality, identity, nuances around faith, and, there's so much content. It's just amazing because some of these are actually quite deep, serious conversations. So yes, you pick up on humor and the kind of funniness about some of these things, but then at the same time you almost get slapped with a bang of reality. You're like, crap, people are dealing with this day in, day out. And I don't want to give spoilers away to the people who haven't read it, but there are moments in the book where you're just like, wow, this happens. People are being affected by so much. So yeah, when you say comedy, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know. Yes and no for me. and totally, I see why you're saying it, but it was a powerful read for me. I think, like I say, with all those characters addressing so many of these things, it was you really get lost in those conversations. And what I wanted to put to you is, how much of that content was influenced by your own upbringing and your own personal experiences?
So yeah, although none of the characters are based on real people, a lot of the impetus behind this book definitely came from my own experience. So my mum was a single mum from when I was about 14, and that was a huge influence for me in lots of ways, in terms of just my experience of growing up, in terms of how I think about feminism, because I think that if you grow up in a single parent family with a single mum, I think it does influence how you think about feminism, because you see a woman in what is actually quite a difficult position, and it influences how you see women. I think it absolutely does. And I remember at the time, this would have been sort of the early 2000s, I guess. There was a lot of stigma around, and there still is, around single mothers, in a way that there isn't around absentee fathers, and I really wanted to address that. And I've not done a puff piece. This book does not suggest that the relationship between Nenna and Joni is an easy one, or that it's perfect all the time, because it's not. It's real. It's human. But I wanted to sort of to redress that balance a little bit, and sort of give another perspective to it.
So again, this wasn't a planned question, but just something you said. So obviously your mom being kind of your inspiration in terms of, and you've experienced being in a single household. Do you think, so I know when I read the book, I think my comment was like, damn it, I want to know more about Maurice's story.
Yeah.
I think you may have evaded that element of it because of your personal experience.
Oh, do you mean maybe I didn't write as much about Maurice because of that?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think at the time, if somebody had said to me, "No, you need to write a story about two," excuse me, you've got a bit of a cough. If my editor had come back to me and said, "No, I don't like this. I want you to write a story about sort of a fully functioning family with two loving parents who are happy together," I think I would have been a bit lost. But at the same time, it was very purposeful in terms of I wanted to write about not so much Maurice, but I wanted to write about the Morris-shaped hole in Nenna and Joni's lives, because that's a very real thing for them. And it was in a way, for me, it was also a real thing. And I wanted to write about how difficult that was, and how impactful that is, without sort of positioning these two people, Nenna and Joni. I didn't want to position them as victims exactly, but I think it was important for me I wanted the reader to feel a bit bereft, as they would feel.
Yeah, and I think that you really do convey that, which is, I think, like I say, I know a bang on about his story, but I almost felt wanting so much more to know about where it goes for Nenna with her relationship with her father, and because his character is the one that you touch upon, but in very subtle ways, and it's kind of like, I'm like, dude, give me more. I want to know. I want to know him, and I want to know the attraction between him and Joni, because they were so different, and yet this love story is powerful, and you feed it without actually seeing it or knowing it. You kind of you have enough there to make you think, damn, this must have been powerful, like, you know, a real strong relationship at the time. But yeah, it was fragile and it breaks so easily. And again, I don't want to give away why if you haven't read the book, but yeah, it kind of leaves me wanting with that side. So dialogue books, if you ever want Oki to go back about a second sequel to it, sorry. But no, I'm really playing with you. Right, so moving on. So obviously identity, like we've alluded to, is runs through the whole book. Why was it so important for you to explore those themes?
I think because it really allows me to talk about a lot of other things as well. Identity is such a big word. It is made up of so many things. Not only the big things like, you know, race, gender, sexual orientation, faith, which are all part of the novel, but also things like the relationship that you have with your parents and how well you're doing in school, and what you want to be when you're older, and what you want to do with your life when you leave home. And identity is such a big question that I almost didn't really explicitly consider it when I was writing the book. I was thinking of the things that constitute identity, definitely. But in terms of Nenna's identity, I was thinking of her very specific questions and how those build up to something bigger rather than the other way around. Yeah. So I think that it was really important for me to consider those questions. But yeah, in a slightly different way, I guess, from how you might think when reading the book.
And I think as a reader, it was lovely because you journeyed with, like I say, each character in finding themselves. So as much as this is coming of age for Nenna, this was almost like Joni also, you know, finding self-love and acknowledging her and acknowledging her journey. And that's people, isn't it? We're all on this crazy, mad journey of navigating this world. And we all have stories to tell. And even though they might seem like the most banal tales to tell, they're still our personal stories. And, you know, that was lovely about Jonathan's character too. And, you know, it was almost like the relationship he was in, and how that, you know, as unkind as it was to him, it made him see himself and it made him find his value. So yeah, it was lovely. It was lovely to follow those different traits in the stories. So again, kind of going on to some of the other themes that you address. Faith and religion often comes up in your writing, and I wanted to reference something else which isn't in the book itself, but it's an article you wrote for it's called Troubles with God, and it features in Safe on Black British Men Reclaiming Space by Derek Wusu, which came together in 2019. And you talk about, the title is called Troubles with God, and in that you discuss very much where you sit on this in this topic. And I guess my question to you is, if you see religion and faith as separate entities, and where you stand on them now, because obviously in the Private Joys, there was a lot of discussion on the church and on acceptance around sexuality and certain individuals, and obviously there's a key moment in the book that relates to this and actually pulls the whole story together with a bang. So yeah, I just wanted to know your reflections on it.
Yeah, so do you mean if I see religion and faith as separate, did you say, or religion and identity as separate?
Religion and faith as a separate identity.
Yeah, I think I do. So I guess to give a bit of background for anybody who maybe hasn't read that essay, my experience of religion was that I grew up in the church, in some ways quite a similar experience to Morris's experience. You know, I grew up in a religious family, went to church every Sunday. But by the time I was about Nenna's age, actually about 17, I lost my faith, I left the church, and I sort of had to figure out my whole worldview from there. But what's interesting for me, I think, is that I don't have a faith as such, or I don't have a religion, but maybe I have a kind of, but that faith has still stayed with me. Yeah. Or I don't have a faith, but the religion has still stayed with me.
So that's what I'm trying to get at. So for me, I see it as almost like the religion in terms of like, you know, the organized and the very structural side of it, but the faith as in the spiritual pull. And so where do you stand on that? Do you still feel like you have some sort of spiritual connection as opposed to having to go to church and being very practical in that sense around it?
Yeah, I think I don't. I don't have a religious faith in that. I don't believe in a God. I don't have that belief anymore. But I think that I've always felt a pull towards some of the elements, some of the more benign elements, I think, of Christianity, which was my religion when I was growing up. In that, you know, the language of the Bible, some of it is so incredibly beautiful. The ritual of a church service and the way of seeing the world in terms of this journey from incompletion and sin to redemption, and this idea that it is something that is in your hands and that you can and should try and achieve. It is, I think, something that really influenced the journeys of this book and how they're expressed. You know, it's a whole way of seeing the world that I think is perhaps attractive to a lot of people because it reflects how a lot of us see life. It's a journey that you start off and you are imperfect and you end up imperfect, and you have to try and figure out a way of being the best version of yourself.
And yet for some people it can be so limiting and can put so much constraints on them. So I guess it's very much how you take it, isn't it? So,
absolutely. Yeah. And you know, in the essay and then definitely in the novel, I try not to shy away from the less benign elements of Christianity because those are also very real for a lot of people. I don't want to sort of apologize for organized religion because that's not my intention.
And actually, I appreciated that, you know, as a woman from the Islamic faith, and you know, we are always navigating this balance of, you know, being out there in the world and, you know, finding our own journeys in our faith and in our religion, and you know, and in life, and they all kind of come together at times, and they are challenged at times. And I like that you, like, this wasn't an all nicety book. It was that side was tough to read, but at the same time, like I say, religion can sometimes put so many constructs on people, and you know, sometimes the way it's taught or passed on can be so limiting, as opposed to, like in your article you talk about, you know, being accepting of people. Unfortunately, sometimes it's delivered in a way that it isn't accepting of people, and so I'm glad that you addressed it in the way that you did. And I think that was the bit in the book where I was reduced to like tears and just was like, whoa, you know, that it's tough to read. It's tough to read it, like I say, especially when you know that it wasn't unimaginable. You know, that scene that takes place, you can imagine there's people out there thinking, that's it, you know, that's the line I have to take to be myself or to be valued. So
really, what's been interesting for me is that after I've written this book, a few people have come forward and said, I've had Jonathan's experience either in very, very directly some of the time, or in some sort of slight change on that experience, which is really moving for me, because even though that wasn't my experience, you know, without giving it away, what happens to Jonathan could very easily have happened to me. And you know, it does happen to people all the time. Jonathan's experience of religion is not a unique one at all.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad we discussed that, and you know, like I say, proud of you for addressing it. And you know, I think with religion, it's one of those things that people will always have a different stance on it, and you know, I think the best way to go about it is just to be the best person that you can be and tolerant of everybody. And so, well done for addressing it the way that you did.
Give me one moment, Aisha. I'm just going to switch the light on because the light. I'm sitting in the window. The light is fading. I don't want to disappoint.
I was thinking the same thing with my side, so I'll do the same. You do the same. Back in 10. And if anybody's got any comments, drop us a quick message while we do this.
Am I visible? I might have to reposition myself somehow. How about this? Okay, that's.
You're good. I'm loving the wall colour. It looks like ammonite.
Thank you.
It's a lovely grey. I think I have it on my walls too. Right. By the way, I hope everyone's enjoying this so far, and I'm actually less nervous now, which is good. I kind of settled down a little bit. So yeah, please do drop your comments, and there will be an opportunity for questions in a bit. I'm actually rounding up mine soon, so I've got a few more questions to put to Oki, and then if you've got any questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. And hopefully Oki will do another short reading for us shortly. So yeah, just give us your feedback. So moving on again. Now, we've talked about religion, we've talked about identity. The other really powerful and obviously the crux of this book is the relationship between Joni and Nenna. And you've captured that so like movingly and vividly. And you know, you see all the madness of being a woman, a mom, a daughter, a teenage, hormonal. Like you've captured it. But how hard was that as a male to write not one but two lead female protagonists? Like, I'm a woman, dude. I don't even want to start writing how crazy our heads are sometimes, right? And yet you've managed it. So please tell me how you did this.
Thank you so much. You know, is the biggest compliment I think I've got on this book was when one of the judges for a prize I was shortlisted for said, in some ways, it was quite hard to believe that this novel was written by a man. It was the hugest compliment for me. It was like, yes, please put that on the front cover of the paperback when it comes out. But yeah, in some ways it was difficult, I guess, but really it's because a lot of it was influenced by my own experience of having a single mum. And not only because I've seen what that looks like firsthand, but also because the nature of being in that kind of single parent family means that you aren't protected, I guess, from some of you aren't shielded or sheltered from the sort of the building blocks of parenthood, like the basic stuff that needs to go on in order for you as a child to grow up and live your life. So Nenna and Joni take turns to cook, for example. Nenna is very aware that Joni has other things to do, and yet she's always on time to pick her up. And, you know, there's little things like that influence just the experience of being a child, because you sort of have to take on elements of being a parent in some ways. And that's a really big part of my childhood. You know, I was one of the few people I knew who got to uni and knew how to do their own laundry, because you just have to. It's impossible. I think everybody should.
You're well trained.
Yeah, you have to be. I think it's just a practical thing. Because as a single parent, you cannot do everything for a child. Yeah. But also, what I did, I guess, when I was thinking about the female characters, I remember doing some research, like physical, can you imagine, like on internet research and going into Manchester Central Library and checking out books on sort of, you know, single motherhood and female experience and teenage girlhood. And, you know, it's not that I didn't learn anything from those books because I read a range of people's experiences, but I thought if I carry on doing this, it's going to come out rigid and starchy and not organic. And I thought, actually, what I should do is just take my experiences, break them down as far as I can, and then build, you know, in terms of what made them male, and then build them up again in terms of the specific characters' experiences of being female in their specific ways. And I think what I tried to bear in mind was that I'm not writing every woman's experience. I'm writing these very specific to women's experiences that are inflected by their own circumstances in very specific ways. And that load off a lot. That took a lot of weight off my shoulders.
Well, I can tell you now, I'm not a single mum, but so much of how you covered these characters was so relatable, both from when I've been a teenage hormonal young lady to a mum now. And I feel like you captured it well. And I'm convinced, Oki, that if we believe in reincarnation, you will be coming back as a woman. My dear, you'll be coming back as a woman. Because you nailed it, you know, and that was really interesting. And actually, somebody also made that comment to me where they were like, wow, this is a male writing it. But also what was interesting is they said they couldn't believe your age. So I don't know if you want to share how old you are, Oki, but you are a lot younger than me. And you know, it was written with a very mature head, right? And that was a comment somebody made to me too, and I was like, yeah, you definitely, you know, I don't know if you ever put an age on Joni, but you know, I saw her at a sort of similar age to me, maybe like late 30s, early 20s, around that thing. And, someone who isn't in that time in their life, to be able to capture that and, like the stresses and the hormones and the insecurities that you take from you from being a teenager, and also the parallels in their insecurities, very much what Nenna was going through, Joni was going through, you did that in a really impressive way. So again, congrats on this. So let me just mark up where I am so we know. Okay, right. So this is a really interesting one. I've sent it to you, and sometimes I don't know if I'm getting this across, but earlier I said that when you read the book, depending on where you are in your life and what angle you come from, you'll read these stories differently. So actually for me, I found Joni's character and Joni's story the kind of crux of the book, as opposed to Nenna. And I know the book's called The Private Joys of Nenna Maloney. So I guess what I wanted to ask was, why that title, and whose tale were you actually trying to tell? Like, did you have one in mind, or did you want it to be a parallel story?
That's a really interesting question. So in terms of the title first, I really wanted to, there's a moment in the novel where and I don't think this is too much of a spoiler, where Nenna is at, I think she's at a concert, or I should know this, I wrote the book. She's at a performance, and this is an experience I've had, not exactly the same, but Nenna's at a performance by a black artist, and a friend of her mother's, a white friend of her mother's, who is very well-intentioned and very nurturing and warm and loving, has taken her to this performance, and along with Nenna's mother Joni and her own friend, who Nenna's never met before, and Nenna experiences this pressure to enjoy the art that she's seeing because it's a black artist in a certain way, and there's no room for her to, and she feels that there's no room for her to just have her own private reaction, to love it personally and for herself. And then she feels this pressure of, if I don't respond the way you want me to respond, am I a bad black person? Am I doing blackness wrong? And she doesn't really have the vocabulary and the experience to be able to navigate that properly. And for her, there's a really painful loss for her of a kind of very important private joy, that she should be able to have that personal relationship with her own background, with heritage, with the black community, that she's been denied in that specific way. But I thought I wanted that title because it relates, I think, to wider things within the book. So the privacy, I think, of that a lot of the characters' experience is a very negative one. There's a lot of loneliness in this book in different ways. There's a lot of isolation in different ways. But there's also hopefully a lot of joy. I wanted to write a book which is not purely about black suffering, without whitewashing it or without erasing it. I also wanted to write a book which gives a balance of joy and self-discovery and redemption and coming of age, while also, not erasing the sadness.
Yeah, and actually, you talked about it, which something hadn't occurred to me, but now that you've said it, so the idea of a lot of isolation in it is so true, because each character is almost trapped in their own selves and their own experience. But yet, what really struck me, and again, when you've just touched upon it, is Jonathan and Nenna's relationship. And I think it was just such a beautiful way in which they, through each other and through their dialogue, come out of themselves. And, Nenna embraces herself because of the strength she gets from Jonathan, and Jonathan also develops in himself. So yeah, it's really nice that, again, how these different stories have intertwined, and as much as there's isolation, as much as there is harrowing moments, there is also, like you say, celebration and joy and coming of age and development and growth. So yeah, really, really, again, well done. It comes across amazing in that. I was wondering, so I'm coming close to the end, but I thought it would be really nice, before I round up sort of the formal questions, if you would do us another quick reading.
Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And whilst you're finding that Oki, I just wanted to say that the paperback, I can't even talk there. The paperback version is due out, I believe, shortly. I don't know if you have an exact date on that.
It's on the 8th of October.
October. So I know there will be links to various indies that will be selling it. We hope to have copies through at Maloney Wright. So if you are interested and you'd like to help us and order through us, then please drop us a DM or follow us on Instagram, because, like I say, we are very much want to promote Northern Voices and Manchester Voices, and people like Oki, who are local to us, who are gorgeous humans, and that's what we're about. So yeah, you can look at Maloney Wright, you can go to Chorlton Bookshop, you can go online if you have to. Don't go on Amazon, please. God, no, don't go on Amazon, right? At least if you're going to go for someone, go for an indie publisher. So I will now leave you to read an extract, and then I've got 2 more questions, and then a little bit of fun.
Fantastic. So I'm going to read from the opening prologue to the book, and this prologue is quite complicated, so I'm going to explain just a little bit about it. We start the book by meeting Nenna's parents before they meet each other, and Morris, her father, before he meets Nenna's mother, before they form a relationship, before Nenna's even born. They're both in Cambridge. Morris has graduated recently, and he's working, he's an engineer, and he is an evangelical Christian, and he and some other young men from his church are figuring out a way to get the word of God to the community. So they're going into cafes and spreading the word of God by writing biblical quotations on postcards and handing them out to strangers, really. And in this scene, they're trying to figure out what on earth they're going to choose, because the Bible is a big text with lots of different potential messages to draw from it. And there's been Jonathan at this point, who is Joel suggested a poem about a cat, because it's a religious poem, and Morris is kind of trying to get them to sort of pick a religious quotation that he really likes. Right, said Morris firmly. So we aren't going to use Leviticus 18:22, and we can't use the poem, I'm afraid. No, Joel, don't look at me like that. We can't. I'm sorry. So let's keep thinking. They went back to work, flicking through passages familiar and unfamiliar. Joel glancing resentfully at Jonathan, Alistair glancing longingly at Jonathan, Morris pretending to read, but too resentful and frustrated at all the glancing to see any of the words. Eventually, Alistair spoke up, his finger on a verse in his Bible. He was excited but cautious, like an archaeologist unearthing a delicate find that still might crumble before it saw the light. I think I found something, he said. What have you got, Alistair? Said Morris, hardly daring to hope. He was almost coming round to the idea of Christopher Smart, who wrote the cat poem, when Alistair began to read from his Bible, a much older translation. He had been reading Job. Of course, how had Morris forgotten Job, to whom God had spoken directly in his suffering? Canst thou lift up thy voice to the clouds, that abundance of waters may cover thee? Who hath put wisdom in the inward parts, or who hath given understanding to the heart? What could be better? Job was the one to whom God, on a whim, had stripped bare of all his luck, of all the contentment that supposedly makes belief easy. Job was the one God had made naked before him, and in return, God had bared himself to the man, as much as he was ever going to bear himself to anyone. He had answered Job with typical indirectness, not with answers, but with more questions. Morris was relieved. Finally, they had found a new way to deliver the old message. It felt precisely right. For comic relief, Joel had wanted to include the verse in which God told Job to, quote, "Gird up thy loins now like a man, I will demand of thee and declare thou unto me." But the others decided against this, unsure if most people would appreciate the humour and afraid that it might send the wrong message about what they were trying to achieve. Morris beamed at Alistair and shook his hand. "You think it'll work?" said Alistair. "I think it will," said Morris.
Brilliant. Thank you, Oki. That's brilliant. Right. Well, you know what I'm going to say to all of you, don't you? If you haven't read it, go and get a copy, or wait till the paperbacks are out and order it, and, you know, enjoy and read this book, because it really needs to be celebrated. It's coming into a year now, almost from when it was released. How much has happened in a year? So, yeah. I've got 2 last questions kind of from our formal one. And then if it's all with all due respect to everybody else, I hope it's all right. But I thought it'd be funny to just put Oki on the spot a little bit and give him a quick fire round of totally random questions, because sometimes these Q&As get very serious and, you know, really intense and too deep. And obviously, I just want to know about him. It would be nice for you to know about him. So we're going to put him on the spot a little bit. So my last question, Oki, was, what books influenced you when you were growing up? So if you've got any kind of key titles, and then also just to round it up, you were supported by the New Writing Author Award. How important was that for you, and what advice would you give to students or aspiring authors? And maybe also you could allude a little bit to the process of publishing, what that entailed. So if I leave that for you to sum up, and then I guess what we could do is maybe open up to the audience to ask some questions, and then we'll do the quick fire round. Great.
Yeah. So books that influenced me when I was a book that influenced me when I was growing up. Obviously, lots of books I loved to read when I was a kid, but I think maybe the one that influenced me most was The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. In case anybody doesn't know it, it's a beautiful, beautiful novel about what set in India, about essentially lots of things, but what happens. It's mostly about what happens when a middle-class woman falls in love with an untouchable man, and the sort of the tragedy that ensues from there. And it's not a spoiler to tell you it's a tragedy, because one of the very clever things the book does is, in the very first chapter, almost the entire plot is sort of unraveled. And it's not really about finding out what happens, but how it happens and wanting to know anyway, even though you already sort of know what's going to happen. It's a beautiful book that is so knowing and wise and profound and just beautifully crafted. And one of the loveliest things that's happened to me actually was that one of my sixth formers who read it, because I taught The God of Small Things to my sixth form, and one of them said, "I can see the influence of that book in your novel," which was an incredible compliment. It was huge. And yes, New Writing North is an incredible organisation. Again, if anybody doesn't know it, they're sort of a writing agency that's based in the Northeast. They support writers who live and or work in the north of England. They every year they give out awards, the Northern Writers Awards, and I was fortunate enough to receive one for what was then a draft of the novel. And they not only gave me a bit of money, which was very welcome as I was a trainee teacher at the time, but they also championed me relentlessly, really. They were so encouraging, and they really championed me for years after the award. It was really through them that I met my agents and my editor. They sent my now editor my manuscript, and she took it on, and it was really as simple as that. After a year or two of my sending it out and getting rejections every now and then, so I really owe them a lot. They're a fantastic bunch of people. In terms of how maybe if I talk about how the publishing industry works first, and then give a bit of advice. So everybody, I guess my journey to publication was atypical in that my manuscript was sent by someone other than me to the people who are now my agent and editor. But typically what will happen is you will submit to an agent or to a publisher or both, because big publishers especially tend not to want unsolicited manuscripts. So a lot of the time you'll find that you submit to an agent who will hopefully then take you on and then represent you to submit your work to publishers and hopefully find you a publication contract. And the way that works is really you just find out what an agent wants to read, whether you can research their website and find out whether they publish the kinds of books that you are writing and if they share the same kind of passions as you, and sort of tailor your submissions to that. And same with the publisher, if you're submitting to publishers, because they're all slightly different. They're all human beings and they have their own tastes and interests and special topics and things. So it's important to do your research. So I guess another bit of advice I'd give would be that, to sort of treat it like a job application, and really sort of in the same way that you research a company that you want to work for, an organization, before you apply, you do the same with the book, and really trying to figure out what the best way to approach them is. They all have their own sort of stipulations about how to approach them, so it's a good idea to read on those. Just to try and make sure that you write something that you are passionate about and you want to spend time and effort really championing and pushing. because the likelihood is that you'll have to. So yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Oki. And just to add to that, so I can see as an indie bookseller and a promoter of these books that awards like the New Writing North Award are so needed. And I think there's been, and for aspiring writers in the North and in Manchester, there has been a real shift of late from publishing houses moving their kind of bases from the South to the North. I mean, Harper North is up here. You've got Children's Book North, which is a grouping of Hachette.
Yeah.
There's a real shift in wanting to discover Northern voices. I think, London and the London market has been is overwhelming, and it's been done for many, many years. And actually, I think people are now are realizing that there are stories and the cultural experiences and the language and the dialect and day-to-day living is so different that you can't put all literature in that southern bubble, and this new north-south divide has to give. And it's really nice to see that actually we need to see, I think, in all the arts. But the fact that there is a shift in the literature world is amazing to see. It's something Maloney Wright is very passionate about, wanting to pull these voices. And so I would say, look out for similar writing schemes, similar awards that are out there. I know Children's Book North, who, like I say, are a grouping from Hachette. They did a live Zoom a few weeks back where they really talked about this northern authenticity, and I would totally say embrace it, but also hold these publishing houses to account, because you can't talk the talk in my world and then not do something about it. And I'm sure, I know you totally would agree with that. So everybody, if you're into writing, get it out there. Oki, my lovely, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for answering my kind of formal questions. I think it would be really lovely to read some of the comments that we've had, and if anyone's got any questions that they are like dying to put out there, then please alert me somehow. I'm going to read this comment because it's just made my day. Thank you, Jen. Thank you for asking such pertinent questions, Aisha, and thank you for sharing your answers over Chukwu, reading to us and writing such an unputdownable book. Thank you so much, Jen. That's made my day. I don't know, has anyone got any questions that they would really like to put to Oki?
I can see one here from Hala, I think.
Yes.
She says, hi, as the book is written from different perspectives, do you find that you're a people watcher or observer and work that into your stories? That's a really interesting question. Yeah, I think I am. I was talking to somebody about how to write dialogue the other day, because it is a tricky thing, writing dialogue. And I do find I'm interested in people. Aisha mentioned before how everybody has their own sort of stories that help make up who they are, and even if they might seem mundane to the outside world, I think everybody has them. Everybody has their own sort of, I guess, crucial moments in life and tipping points, and I'm really interested in those because everybody has them, and they're these things that we maybe don't get to see. In terms of in terms of people watching, I think I do it, but I try and make sure that I balance it with the imaginary world I'm trying to create. I'm teaching a play to my sixth form at the moment called A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry, who is this fantastic writer who talks about realism in terms of not just what is, but what can be. And I think try and balance those two things so that I do want the book to be believable, but I also want it to be to reflect a world that I want to be possible as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I love people watching, but I think I'm also very conscious that once I'm watching these people, my understanding is from where I'm rooted and my biases. And I think, like you say, it's really nice to see where that can go instead, where the potential is, and framing that into a bigger, wider world. So yeah, really, really interesting point there. Let me read another one out to you, my lovely. So David is saying, having read it, it's brilliant. It's a book you can read multiple times just to see it from different perspectives. Can't wait for your next book. When is it coming out? And Will, see this, David, I am on his case for this one. when will Nenna's story be continued?
So, thank you so much, David. That's really, really kind of you to say that. The next book I am editing at the moment, and it will come out in spring 2022, which seems like a long way away, but actually in publishing terms, I think it's not that far away. Books have to be sort of finished a year before they come out. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. It's a departure from what I'm used to. I'm stepping out of my comfort zone, but as Aisha has talked about, that's a fantastic thing to do in life. In terms of when I'm going to continue the story, I have no plans to at the moment. I'm really happy with the way I tied up the characters' stories, but a few people have asked me that about different characters in the novel. So I don't know, never say never. I might continue the story at some point. The more I've been thinking and reading, I've been having ideas about how I might do that. So maybe one day I will.
Yeah. Like I say, I will continue to say it to you. I would always say it to you. I was left wanting so much more, and as much as it was profound and all-encompassing in itself, and there were so many stories, it was so good that I was like, I don't want it to stop. I want more and more and more. So yeah, just keep that little thought in your head. Maybe we'll be blessed with a second book on Nenna. Is there any other questions? Can you see any more, honey?
Let's have a look. Such lovely comments. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Manchester libraries. Huge fan. And they're so important. Oh, somebody said, would love to know about your experience of working with an editor. I think they're called M. That's a really good question as well. So everybody's experience is very different of editors. Like everybody else, they have their own sort of way of working and their own tastes. My editor is called Charmaine Lovegrove, who's the founder and publisher of Dialogue Books, which is my imprint of Little Brown, which is an imprint of Hachette, which is a big machine. And I loved it. I felt so grateful and so fortunate to have that experience of working with an editor. Charmaine had my manuscript and I sent it off to her, and she took some time to read it through, and then she sort of rang me and we had a lovely, profound conversation about what the novel was and where it was going and what it needed to be and what changes might need to be made. And I'm not going to lie, it was a little bit hard at first to hear that this thing that I'd slaved away on in private wasn't completely perfect. I think it was a little bit like I say sometimes it's a bit like, hearing that your novel manuscript is not 100% perfect is a little bit like hearing that your firstborn child is ugly and stupid. But that wasn't what she was saying. It was just sort of what I was hearing. And after I sort of took a moment to think about it more rationally, I was able to appreciate it for this really wonderful experience that it was. And I think that, unless you stay in education or in publishing, you don't really get that attention to your writing in the same way. And that was a really wonderful thing. So we had that conversation and we really talked about, what does this chapter need, or can we clarify this element of it, or this, that, and the other. And it was very collaborative. Again, I've only ever worked with one editor, so that's only I can only talk about Charmaine, but she was very collaborative and she really wanted to make sure it was my work, even if it had her input on it. And I really appreciated that. I felt that she left me a lot of space to be myself. Emma, at one point, she said that one of the things she said was the ending. She thought, I feel like the ending needs something and I don't know what it is. What do you think? And I was very lucky. And it's very lucky that between her reading the manuscript and getting back to me, I'd already thought of a new ending, which is the ending that we have now. And I said, I agree. I think the ending does need something different. And I changed it and she was really happy with it. And that was just a lovely moment of synchronicity. So I couldn't be happier with the editing process. I feel really, really grateful.
Yeah, and Charmaine is an amazing individual, and If anyone doesn't know about her, then I would suggest following Dialogue Books on Instagram and follow Charmaine's journey and story. She's very passionate about her authors and about work representation, which we all are in this conversation. So yeah, definitely check them out. Thank you so much, Oki, my lovely. There's one last question, which is an interesting one, and then what I was going to suggest is I'm amazed. We've gone over an hour. This is like, wow. I never thought it was possible. I thought I'd be so nervous I'd have this wrapped up in 20 minutes and done. But I'm glad. What I thought is, if anybody would like to put any more questions to you, they could either come through on the Mirror Me Right page or get in touch via your Instagram page, either of our Instagrams. If they have any questions for me regarding inclusive books, then again, drop me a message. But, either way, I think both of us are very open to feedback, to conversations, to comments. So if you guys would like to do that, wicked. If not, cool. And thank you so much for joining us. The last question, and then we're going to do a quick fire round, was from Gos4, and this was cool. Are there any plans for a film or TV for the book to be made into a film?
I'd love that. There are no plans that I know of at present. It's one of those things that seems to drift in and out of possibility, and there have been sort of various overtures and things. We're just sort of, we'll see what happens, but no firm plans at the moment.
So basically, watch this space, and my gosh, if it would be a cool script to go on, it would be this. So yeah, let's see, fingers crossed. Right, it's time to be put on the spot. And these are like the weird, the wonderful. They make no sense. Just give me whatever comes to mind. If you want to expand on your answer, cool. If not, take it as it is. I hope you guys enjoy this. Like I say, it's something different. Okay, quick round. You are on the spot. Spaghetti or pizza?
Pizza. Ooh.
Night in with a movie, night out with mates?
Night out with mates.
Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter?
Harry Potter, just.
Ooh. Dickens or Austen?
Oh, that's really hard. Austen.
Austen. Beach holiday or mountains and nature?
Beach holiday.
Beach holiday. Top 3 books?
Top 3 books. This is difficult. Okay. The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. Half of the Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
Yes.
And White Teeth by Zadie Smith.
Nice. Good choices, love. Song of choice on your playlist. So your go-to song.
Choice. I'm going to go with Mood Forever by Beyonce. Fantastic song.
Nice. New York or Paris?
Never been to New York, so I'll say Paris.
Oh, okay. 1960s, 1980s, or the 90s?
That's a really good question. I love 80s music, so I'm going to go with 80s.
Nice. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Disney movies or the Avengers?
These are hard questions. You said this is quick fire. This is really challenging.
Expand if you like.
Avengers.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah, as well.
Malcolm X or Martin Luther King?
That's really hard. They both contributed so much in different ways. Malcolm X.
My choice too. Biggest inspiration. You give me yours.
Biggest inspiration. I think I would say Arundhati Roy as well. Not just as a writer, but also she's so passionate about her activism. She's even been imprisoned for her activism and her writing and her beliefs. So I think, Arundhati Roy, she's an incredible human being.
Yeah, she's incredible, and she doesn't stop. She just keeps giving it, and she tells it as it is. So well done, good choice. Okay, last question, my dear, and then to everybody, thank you, and this will be the end. Favorite author of all time?
Oh, that's hard. Favorite author of all time. If you ask me on a different day, it'll change. But for now, favorite author of all time. Yeah, I think I'd say Arundhati Roy.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, my lovely. It's been a pleasure speaking to you as always, and hopefully when the silly pandemic can die down and we can actually integrate and mix, I'm going to give you the biggest cuddle ever. Thank you, everybody on here that has put up with me and has tuned in and enjoyed this. I hope you have. I hope you will follow some of the other events that Chorlton Book Festival are hosting. And hopefully we will be back again next year for actual live events, because initially the plan was to have a live panel with Oki, and I think they're always a lot more personal and a lot more lovely. But we've done the best that we could for now.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Wishing you well. Did you want to say anything before we end off, darling?
I guess, so just to remind everybody, the paperback of The Private Joys of Nenna Maloney is out on the 8th of October. Please do support Maloney Writes, fantastic organisation. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Nzelu Writes, so Nzelu Writes, all one word.
Great. Thank you so much, my darling, and thank you for the shout out for Maloney Wright. Like I say, we're passionate about this and passionate about you and other authors. Very much the same from me. Before I say goodbye, you can follow Maloney Wright on Instagram. We promote books from diversity books from early years right through to young adults and adult reads. Our website is due to be live by the end of the month, but in the meantime, we're fairly active on Instagram, just by both of us running our main, our full-time day jobs in schools. And yeah, thank you very much. It's been an absolute joy tonight, and yeah, look after yourself, stay safe. Bye from me.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye. I think you log off.